got a couple of things at the top here for you, and then we'll get right at it. First, I want to highlight the new directive. I think you've seen it, issued by the Department on the use of masks and other public health measures. In accordance with an executive order, all individuals on military installations and all individuals performing official duties on behalf of the department from any location other than the individual's home, including outdoor shared spaces, will wear masks in accordance with the most current CDC guidelines. All individuals on military installations will also continue to practice social distancing in combination with other everyday preventative actions to reduce the spread of COVID-19. The full memo is available online if you care to see it. We certainly encourage all our employees in the department to make sure that they've looked at it. As I think you've heard, the White House COVID task force announced this morning that the Secretary Austin, has approved 1,110 active duty service members to support 5 FEMA vaccination centers. A team of 222 personnel will support each one of these mega sites. I think you know there's 2 different types that FEMA is working to establish in areas of the country. I'm talking in this particular case of the mega sites. These teams will include medical and support personnel. It'll be largely medical personnel. Details for the exact sourcing of the requirement is now at the service level. I'm not able to read out to you specifically how each of these sites will be sourced. That's working at the service level right now. And of course, it always relies on, we are supporting FEMA, and FEMA will determine which site each team supports. I will continue to work closely with FEMA to scope additional requirements. FEMA and the department will jointly determine when DoD vaccination capabilities are no longer required. Now also, as you may have seen yesterday in the Secretary's statement after President Biden's speech, the department will conduct a global force posture review of U.S. military footprint, resources, and strategies. This review will help inform the Secretary's advice to the Commander-in-Chief about how we best allocate military forces in pursuit of our national interests. The review will be led by the Acting Undersecretary of Defense for Policy in close coordination with the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, of course. We also will, as the Secretary indicated, consult closely with our allies and partners as we move through this review, and we expect to have it completed by mid-year. For a couple of readouts. Earlier this morning, Secretary Austin spoke with His Excellency Ashraf Ghani, the President of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, to reaffirm the United States' commitment to an enduring U.S.-Afghan partnership. Secretary and President Ghani discussed the shared sacrifices of U.S. and Afghan forces in the field and the importance of the Afghan peace process and the imperative for a negotiated settlement to end the war. In closing, both the Secretary and President Ghani emphasized the importance of seizing this opportunity for peace. This morning, Secretary Austin also hosted Avril Haines, the Director of National Intelligence. The two spoke about the importance of collaboration between the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. Director Haines also had a chance to meet with Chairman Milley as well as senior intelligence officers of each service. Lastly, the Secretary met with the chiefs in the Joint Chiefs Conference Room, colloquially known as the Tank. Met with them this morning. It was his first opportunity to meet with them collectively in the Tank to discuss a range of issues of importance to all of them. He had a chance to walk through with them what his priorities were as he is now getting more acclimated to the job and sort of things he wanted to tackle, as well as listening to them about what was on their minds and what their priorities were. So it was the first of what I'm sure will be many such discussions. With that, take questions. I think I have. Oh, by the way, so I have been appropriately counseled by all of you about the use of the phones versus the room, and I can be taught. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to 2 on the phone and 2 in the room, and we'll just keep going back and forth like that. We'll start with Lita. Go ahead.
Hi, John. Thanks. two things. One, I'm wondering if you have any even timing estimates on the FEMA teams, and just a quick point of clarification. Do you know if the military of one of these five or two of these five or whatever, is one of them going to one of the sites in California, or are two of the teams going to California?
So the first, well, I shouldn't say the first. What we know is that sort of there's 1,100, an initial group, one team of 222 will be deploying to California, to a site in California in coming days. We expect that they'll be able to get on site on or about the 15th of this month. But I would refer you to FEMA to speak specifically to what location that is. Now that's just one team of this initial tranche of 1,100 personnel. We're still working with FEMA to determine what those other teams, what sites those other teams will go to, and in what order. In other words, what the timeline is. What I can tell you is the first team of 222 will be going to a site in California. Does that answer your question, Lita?
Yeah, the second one was actually Saudi Arabia. Can you give us a broader understanding right now of what U.S. military aid or training is going to Saudi Arabia, and whether or not there are any, I think all the Patriot batteries were removed, but if there's any other equipment or other military aircraft and other weapon systems there, and what your understanding is of what the military will be able to continue to do under the president's latest order. Thanks. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, I'll have to take the question on the laydown, Lita. I don't have that in front of me, exactly what is there in the country. But as a result of the president's order yesterday, DoD had been providing some limited non-combat assistance for coalition operations, and that would include intelligence and some advice and best practices. And that all has been terminated. But Saudi Arabia remains a partner in terms of combating terror in the region. The president's order was very much directed on the coalition efforts in Yemen, and I would stress that this will be an interagency process, figuring out how we're going to go forward on this, and we certainly wouldn't want to get ahead of any decisions that haven't been made yet. Now I need to put my glasses on. You guys have got to write this in big font from now on. Louis Martinez.
Hey, John. Quick question about the global posture review. You said that you expect it to take place or be resolved by mid-year. Does that mean that any force level drops around the world or any inflows are not going to happen until that time? And particularly given the focus on Germany. Thanks.
So, Louis, I mean, in terms of permanent structure and permanent areas where we are permanently based, forward deployed, if you will, obviously the Secretary wants to get his arms around all that, and that's what the posture review is about. It's about where we are based and to what degree we are there in terms of numbers of men and women, but also the purpose for being there. And that's what the force posture review is all about. But, and I don't think you were asking this, but just to be clear, we still have a rotational presence in many parts of the world. Just last week we were talking about aircraft carriers and where they're operating. So that rotational deployment scheme, that's not affected by the posture review. We still have security commitments around the world that we have to meet, and we're going to continue to meet them. But before the Secretary advises or recommends to the President any permanent force structure changes in terms of our facilities and the units that we have around the world, he wants to get this posture review done first. Did that answer your question, Louis?
It does, and also just on Afghanistan, is that separate? You know, the conditions-based assessment of the deal with the Taliban, is that a part of the same posture review, or is that a separate assessment also itself?
I mean, that's obviously an area of current operations, Louis. So I mean, I think we will be, the administration will be reviewing future force posture in Afghanistan in a way that's commensurate with what we're trying to get done in Afghanistan. You know, trying to end this war in a responsible way, and it'll be done in concert with, of course, our NATO partners that are there on the ground. So I wouldn't go so far as to say it's totally separate. I mean, the global posture review is still looking at our force posture around the world, but obviously what happens with respect to Afghanistan will be done in keeping with the decision-making processes that are already in place for that part of the world, and in keeping with, again, our NATO allies. You know, the defense ministerial is coming up. The secretary intends to participate, and obviously this will be a key topic of discussion inside that venue as well. Lucas.
John, how does an unarmed adult male break into a plane at Andrews used by the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, and other top government officials?
That is exactly what the Air Force is investigating now. I think everybody's taken this very seriously, and the Acting Secretary of the Air Force and the Air Force Chief of Staff are going to order the Air Force Inspector General to fully investigate this issue. Everybody takes seriously what happened, and they will do a thorough investigation. And I'm sure they will learn things out of this that we'll be able to share with you. I can also tell you that clearly they've adjusted some of their security protocols at Andrews this morning. Won't go into the details of that, of course. And I might add, and I didn't say it when I first mentioned it, but this investigation by the Air Force IG, this review and investigation, will also include their installations worldwide. They're not just going to limit it to Andrews. I mean, clearly they're going to investigate this incident, but they're also going to take a look at security protocols across the force.
How long was this guy on the plane?
I don't have exact details about this, Lucas. I would refer you to the Air Force for more specific details about this.
A description of the suspect. We just heard unarmed adult male. Any more than that?
I don't have anything more than that. Again, that's really for the Air Force to speak to. But again, everybody's taken this seriously. The Secretary's taken this seriously, and we'll leave it to the Air Force to investigate this and report out. Yeah, Orrin.
He was arrested on outstanding warrants. Do you know what those warrants were for? And just in terms of, it seems like a pretty big failure or a screw-up, letting this happen and letting him get onto the flight line and onto a C-40.
I don't know about, I've seen reports about existing warrants, Orrin, and I'd refer you to local law enforcement for that. That's not the kind of thing that we would have knowledge about. And again, I think it wasn't a question you asked, but to your point, everybody in the department, and certainly everybody in the Air Force, understands what a serious matter this is. They have made adjustments to their security protocols at Andrews. They've now ordered a full investigation of it, and they've gone a step further and ordered a look at all the security protocols at installations worldwide. So let's let them do their work. Let's let the investigators finish what they need to finish. We'll learn things, I'm sure, about this, and I have every confidence that the Air Force will share what they've learned with you when they can. Okay, I got to go to the phones now, or I'll get in trouble. So, let's see, Phil Stewart, Reuters.
Thanks, John. Just quickly following up on Afghanistan. So did Secretary Austin raise the May deadline with President Ghani, and did he exempt Afghanistan from this global posture review? I'm not totally clear on where it fits in there. And I have a quick question about the mask mandate too. When done.
clearly they talked about, as I said in my readout, they talked about the importance of the peace process, and they talked about the importance of this being Afghan-led. They talked about the enduring commitment that we have to Afghanistan writ large. I won't get into specific discussions, as I said, about force posture, because no decisions have been made on force posture at this time. And when I think I don't want you to get hung up or wrapped around the axle on whether Afghanistan is or is not in the global posture review. I mean, we have to, as an administration, we have to decide, and we are reviewing what we're doing in Afghanistan. We're reviewing the Doha Agreement. We're reviewing the compliance with the Doha Agreement. We have recommitted ourselves to a political solution. We don't believe there's a military solution, and that process of review is ongoing. Will it inform or potentially inform the global posture review? Possibly, but I don't think I would not. I don't think it's useful to think of this in a binary way. It's in or it's out. There is an interagency process going on to review what our future is going to look like in Afghanistan. We've already said that while no decisions have been made, that decisions will be conditions-based. And to the degree that that work informs the posture review, well, that's to the benefit of the posture review. But we just, I mean, I wouldn't try to look at it in such a binary way. Does that answer your question, Phil?
Yeah, thanks. And then on the mask mandate, could you just give us a sense of what drove the change in the mask mandate in general? And is there going to be an exception made for all briefers, including yourself?
What drove the mask mandate was the President of the United States, who issued an executive order that there was going to be the wearing of masks on all federal properties, and we and you're on federal property right now. So that's what drove it, was the President's executive order. Although I would hasten to add that the Secretary fully supports that. I have, as my colleague at the White House has, I have a waiver to not use a mask for the purposes of briefing you, to make sure that we're doing it with clarity and concision. So I wore it on the way up here, and I will wear it on the way out and for the rest of the day. But in the act of conducting a press interaction like this, I have been given a waiver not to wear a mask. Let's see. Dan Lamoth.
Yes, thanks for your time. Two follow-ups on the stand-down related to extremism. The first one, we've seen these in the past for other issues like sexual assault and suicide, but on a force-wide level, can you provide some context for how frequent they are, maybe other issues where it's come up? And then second follow-up, we've seen a number of critics suggest in the last couple of days that this extremism focus in the military amounts to sort of a political litmus test to root out conservatives. Can you just address that in general? Thanks.
Yes, sir. Can I just ask you for clarification on your first question? How frequent are stand-downs? Is that what you're asking, Dan?
I'm aware that they're common in general, sort of, within units, within the service, but I'm talking the force-wide, DOD-wide level stand-downs that we're seeing this time.
Dan, I will. I'm going to have my staff. We'll take your question technically because it's a good one, and I don't have that kind of data in front of me. I don't even know if it exists. But so let me get back to you on that. But I won't challenge your assertion that they are rare. DoD-wide stand-downs are not something that we do frequently or often, and I think in this case it points to the seriousness with which the Secretary and the leaders here at the Pentagon are taking this particular issue. But I owe you a better answer on frequency. On your second question, the argument that this amounts to some sort of political litmus test, that is absolutely unfounded and untrue. First of all, we have this isn't sadly is not an issue that we haven't dealt with or tried to deal with in the past. I mean, one of the last instruction that was written on this, and I think I've talked to you about this, was back in 2012, and I assure you that This issue predates 2012. You heard the Secretary himself talk about when he was in command of the 82nd Airborne down in Fort Bragg, an issue they had with skinheads in the unit. And that was when he was a lieutenant colonel back in the mid-90s. Sadly, this is not something that is new. That said, and as I mentioned the other day, I think the events of January 6th certainly galvanized a sense that it is still in the ranks, still a problem, we, as evidenced by the events that day, we've got to, we've got to take a turn in terms of rooting it out. So it's not about politics. We encourage our troops to vote. We encourage them to register with the political party of their choice. We go out of our way to make it clear that they get a vote, they get a voice in the political electoral process in this country because they're American citizens. It's not about what you believe. It's about what you do with those beliefs. It's about how you act with those beliefs. And when you start acting on those beliefs, whatever they are, and not all extremists in the military are motivated by politics, but whatever the motivation is, when you violate good order and discipline, when you violate the UCMJ or you violate civil laws, then we got a problem. And that's what the Secretary is trying to get after. I will say, and I will say this every single time I get asked about this, because it's really important. The vast, vast majority, the 99.9% of men and women that are serving in the military do so with honor and character and integrity and are upholding our values every single day. And they're putting themselves in harm's way. And sometimes they're doing that right here, not very far from where we're standing. And I think it's important to understand that this is not, while it is troubling, and while we are worried that the numbers may be more than what we'd be comfortable seeing them be at this point. I mean, obviously the number should be zero, but I'm saying that the numbers may be bigger than what we may think. That's what the Secretary wants to get after. It doesn't mean that it's not still a problem worth going after. It doesn't mean that even though the numbers may be small, that it's not an insignificant issue to deal with. Did that answer your questions, Dan?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Tom?
John, I want to get back to Saudi Arabia and what you said about you're going to start providing intel and also best practices. I understand the intel was basically defensive in nature. Someone's going to shoot a missile, the Houthis going to shoot a missile at Saudi Arabia, and the best practices included how to prevent civilian casualties. So if you're getting away from both, won't it make matters worse with harm to civilians and so forth by getting rid of that assistance?
We have made it very clear over a long period of time that we need to see a more serious effort by the Saudis to address the problem of civilian casualties. Again, I wouldn't get ahead of an interagency process on this, on sort of what's the next steps. Clearly, one of the things driving this decision by the administration is the humanitarian crisis in Yemen and how serious it is. And I would also remind you, Tom, that our support to Saudi Arabia isn't just military. I know that's what we're here talking about, but there's other components to the bilateral relationship with Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia does have a legitimate right to self-defense, and they have suffered attacks on that southern border. There's no question about that. What we're talking about here is coalition offensive operations in Yemen, operations that the administration believes have contributed to and made much worse what is already a human catastrophe. And again, I don't want to get into any more specifics other than to say that DOD, we have a role in the president's directive, and we're going to carry that out. We also have a role, and we'll carry out the interagency discussion going forward on this, and what the outcomes look like long term.
But you see how it can make matters worse if you're not providing assistance on how to prevent civilian casualties, and you're not providing specific intel that would help Saudi. They're going to go after this problem anyway. and it could be worse without that key support.
Yeah, again, I take the point. I take the point, and everybody's concerned about civilian casualties, and that has been expressed to the Saudis. I don't want to get ahead of future decisions. Laura?
So just one follow-up on Yemen, and then I have a different question. So are you saying that you're specifically ending intelligence sharing related to the defense of Saudi Arabia?
No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying it's
that's
related.
My understanding as
Related
what the
to
sharing
these are related what we've been doing related to coalition operations inside Yemen.
Okay, because my understanding was that was the bulk of the intel sharing that we did.
I'm not going to talk about intelligence matters up here, but this is related to coalition operations in Yemen.
Okay.
Saudi coalition.
So we were providing that kind of support previously?
We had been providing intel sharing support.
For the coalition operations?
Yes.
Okay. And then my second question is, did Secretary Austin attend the meeting today with the NSC on Iran, and what was discussed?
I'm not going to, I think I'd refer you to the White House for readouts of meetings that are hosted and chaired by the NSC. That's not for us to read out here.
Did Secretary Austin attend?
I'll let the White House speak to NSC meetings and the pace of that. Let me go back to the phones as I promised. Todd from Military Times.
Thank you. You've answered my questions already. Thank you.
I did. Okay. Bonus. Let's see. Jeff, task and purpose.
Thank you. The Air Force just put out its statement that it's ordering a review of security worldwide following this intrusion. I'm wondering, what is it about this particular incident that warrants some kind of worldwide evaluation when it hasn't happened in past intrusions, like when the security forces airman put 5 rounds through a door because he couldn't open it?
Jeff, that's a question that's really better placed to the Air Force. It was the acting Secretary of the Air Force and the Chief of Staff, General Brown, who ordered this review of security protocols worldwide, and I think the Secretary has full trust and confidence in their ability to take a look at what they believe they need to look at for security purposes, and we would refer you to the Air Force for more on that. Let's see, Jared from Al Monitor.
Track how many service members are declining the COVID vaccine, but we've learned there's actually a form, DHA-217, that each service member has to fill out, DHA form 207, indicating whether they have the vaccine or not. Given that, can you give us updated numbers on how many service members have declined?
Jeff, I'm sorry, but I only caught the last 5 seconds of that question, so can you repeat it for me?
Oh, sure. Previously, we've been told that the Defense Department doesn't track the number of service members who've declined getting the COVID vaccine. We've learned there's actually a form called DHA Form 207 that service members have to fill out, and it indicates whether or not they accepted the vaccine. So given that data is available, can you provide us an update on the number of service members who are refusing to get inoculated?
I do not have an update on that, Jeff, and I don't know. I honestly don't know the protocols in terms of what a service member signs or doesn't sign when they elect not to get the vaccine. So I don't know if that kind of, you said that data is available. I don't know that it is, but I'm happy to have my staff take that question and we'll do some research on it. Let's see. I had one more on the phone here. Jared from Al Monitor.
Hi, sir. Thanks so much for doing this. Just a quick question. Yesterday, a United Nations report reported that Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula's leader had been captured back in October. I'm wondering if you can confirm U.S. involvement in the operation, what this Al-Qaeda figure's location is now, and any further details on that.
I'm afraid I can't help you with that from the podium today. Again, we'll take that question. I'd also refer you to Central Command. Perhaps they can help you better, but I'll pull the string here and see if we can't be useful. But again, I think CENTCOM's probably the best place to go. Yeah, go ahead.
Captain Kirby, I have several questions about transgender military service. I saw the statement the Secretary put out after the executive order, but I thought it lacked clarity and a timeline for both transgender enlistments and the military health system paying for transition-related care and surgeries, just as it would for any other medical procedure. Will you affirm the Pentagon will get to both of those outcomes?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with your characterization that it lacked clarity. I mean, it was pretty clear that from the Secretary's statement that if an individual meets all the other fitness and academic requirements to join the military, transgender identity will not be a bar. So it was pretty clear in there that that recruitment and accessions will continue. And he also talked about reversing the decision by the previous administration about not providing associated and appropriate medical assistance and care for those undergoing transition. Now, what does need to be done, and I think I'm getting at the larger part of your question, is, I mean, he gave the department 2 months to come back to him with more specific implementation guidelines and procedures and protocols. This had been started, as you know, in 2016 and then more abruptly stopped in, I think, 2018. I could be wrong about that. So, so a lot of that muscle memory that had been in place in 2016 was gone, and he wanted to give the department a couple of months to get it back, right? And that's what's going on right now, and I'm sure that once we get that, and we've been able to solidify the recommendations going forward, you'll see us put out what the specific implementation on all the aspects of transgender service are.
But what's your expected timeline to get to the end result?
I'm sorry?
What is your expected timeline to get to the end result?
The end result
being providing for care, transgender enlistments, and...
Again, I would say, in terms of enlistments, that issue's solved.
So you can enlist right now and be
You can, if you meet all the other requirements, you know, physical fitness and your academic and all the other requirements to enlist in a branch of the armed forces, transgender identity will not be a bar. So today, somebody can walk in and join. Now, I said there's some implementation things that we have to get in place to make sure that continued service is not impacted either. And so we just want to go back and take a look at where we were in 2016 and make sure we issue appropriate guidelines to the force.
This might be splitting hairs. Transgender identity is not a bar to service, but is a diagnosis of gender dysphoria a bar to service?
No.
And then the executive order calls for consultation with the Joint Chiefs in this matter. What kind of weight will the Joint Chiefs have on this as this goes forward?
The Joint Chiefs are also service chiefs. They have significant Title X responsibilities to recruit, to retain, to train, to equip. That's by law. They are the service providers to the combatant commanders around the world. So they have a very large vote and a voice with the service secretaries, of course, the civilian oversight, in how these policies will be implemented going forward. Again, we're on our way here, and I think in a couple of months we'll be able to provide more detail.
Well, you said vote. That implies that they might be able to vote certain things.
No, look, don't read too much into the word vote. What I meant was they have a voice in the policy-making process. They have they are integral. The service secretaries and the service chiefs are integral to implementing and executing the policies that the secretary has now ordered. And that will happen, and they will be. We will consult with them as we move forward, and they will provide their best advice about how to implement. I think you may be getting at this idea that they're going to somehow resist, or are not in favor of, or will find a way to, a block or stonewall implementation, and that's just not going to happen. That's just not going to happen.
I know somebody wants to move on. I have one last question. Did this issue come up today at all in the tank? And who is spearheading this effort?
I'm not going to read out specifics of the discussions between the secretary and the service chiefs in the tank. But I think I can be wrong about this, so check me. But I think in the memo that the secretary signed, he put the dot on the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness to lead this 60-day implementation review. Tony?
Can you talk about the cost to mobilize the 26,000 National Guardsmen and women to protect us from extremism? What's the going bill right now? I heard it's about $480 million to $500 million.
I think the Army put out a number on
They
that.
didn't put out anything. They deferred to you, I guess.
I don't think I have that figure here. Let me just check. But I think we can get it to you, Tony.
I'd like a breakdown too. I think, well, the public.
I'm sure you would.
You know, is that incurred costs or is that an estimate through April or through how long they're going to be?
Yeah. Tony, let me get back to you. Another taking question. I think that's an easy one. I just don't think.
China, USS McCain transit question of did General Austin, Secretary Austin sign off on the McCain's transit of the Taiwan Strait and then going into the South China Sea, or was that a pre-planned Indo-PACOM exercise?
It did not require a specific sign-off by the Secretary of Defense.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go back to the phones.
Just to follow up on that, why are you still doing those operations, John?
Why are we still doing those? Well, I mean, we have an obligation, have many obligations in the Indo-Pacific theater. One of them is to, of course, reinforcing and supporting the navigation rights and freedoms of all countries in accordance with international law. And that's why we continue to conduct what we refer to as freedom of navigation operations. These are international waters. And I think it's important, we believe it's important, to demonstrate that we support the idea that these are international waters and that we, like every other nation, has the right to operate, to sail, to fly in international maritime space and airspace. Okay. Jillian.
Hi, thank you so much. I do have a question about those mass vaccination centers that were announced today. Do you have any idea where the troops will be coming from? What bases, what installations, what locations around the country? And do you have any idea of, you had mentioned 2 of the 5 will be in California. Where are the other 3 to start out with?
So I'd refer you to FEMA for specific locations. What we can say today is that the initial, the part of the initial group of 1,110, so roughly around 222, that initial tranche, will be going to a site in California. I would refer you to FEMA to talk specifically about what site that is. And as for what units are represented in this initial group of 200 and where they're coming from, I don't have that information right now. As I said at the outset, the military services are sourcing that right now, and I'm sure when we have more information about that, we should be able to provide it. I don't think that would take very long either. As I said, the goal here is to get this initial team of 200 on site on or about the 15th of the month. So, you know, a little bit more than within 10 days away. Dan.
Going back to the earlier question about extremism in the ranks, where do you draw the line, right? So if a service member is, for example, expressing their views that the current president wasn't somehow legitimately elected versus maybe someone who's actually advocating violence, do you draw the line at advocating violence? Extremism is a hard thing to, it's subjective, obviously.
Well, so you've hit on something that's really important, Dan, and that's how you get your arms around this problem. And one of the discussions that in the meeting earlier in the week that the secretary had with the chiefs and the service secretaries was exactly that. What are the definitions? The definitions that we're operating under now were based on 2012 instruction, and so do we need to revisit that? Does that still apply? And I think those are the questions. You're asking the very same question that the secretary and the chiefs are asking. How do you define it? But to your other point, Dan, it isn't about what you've internalized. It's how you externalize those beliefs. And when the externalization of those beliefs threatens or does harm, when it affects the good order and discipline of a unit, then it becomes something that leaders have to have accountability measures in place to deal with. And so that's to you asking where do you draw the line, that's where we are currently at. But again, in terms of what is and what isn't, extremism is something that I think that we all agree we need better definition on, and I don't just mean that in the vocabulary sense of the word.
Sorry, one separate question. On the vaccinations, I understand you can't say how many people have decided not to do it, but at what point, is there a concern that you don't get enough of the personnel vaccinated and you actually can't protect the force if enough people decide not to do it?
Well, so we have to remember it's a voluntary vaccine. And we have to be mindful of that. We want, obviously, to protect everybody in the force. And we want them to have the opportunity to make this decision for themselves. I can tell you that as of today, as the 5th of February, we've administered 76.4% of all the vaccines that we have on hand. So it's a robust process, and it's getting more robust every day. And clearly we have to balance our legitimate concerns for health of the force and readiness with the fact that these individuals have a right to say that they don't want it. But I'm not a clinician and not a doctor, so I can't tell you that a certain number or at a certain percentage all of a sudden gets us there. But we're making a very concerted effort, and as I said, it's getting more refined and better every day. But we're making a very concerted effort to make the vaccines available to as many people in the workforce as we can.
So can I do a quick follow-up on extremism? Those 2012 regs you talk about, so you can be a member of one of these groups,
right,
but not an active member. Is that something you're going to look at, that maybe you shouldn't even be a member of one of these groups?
I think it's safe to say that the Secretary wants the leadership here to look at all components of this, and I certainly wouldn't rule that out as one thing that they're thinking about is how do you get your arms around membership in these groups. You're right. Right now, membership is not considered inconsistent with service in the military, and it really is about what you do with that membership. I'm not going to be predictive one way or the other about where this discussion is going, but I think membership in these groups is certainly something that I would expect for them to look at. Yeah.
Can you please be more specific about the nature of assistance you'll continue to provide to Saudi Arabia to defend its borders? And second question, what level of operation you expect from Saudi Arabia and UAE in the Pentagon's operation against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, of course in the light of...
Right, actually that's a good point. I mean, I should have said that at the top, that, I mean, the U.S. operations against ISIS and Al-Qaeda will continue, that this decision is not affected by that. I think you're asking the same question Lita asked about the panoply of things that we still cooperate with Saudi Arabia with in terms of a bilateral military-to-military relationship, and I'm just not equipped right now today to answer that, so we will get it to you just as we promised to get it to Lita. Let me go back to the phones here. Let's see. Sylvie from AFP.
Hello. I have a follow-up to a question, an answer you gave to Louis about the review, the worldwide review, posture review. Do you know how many troops, U.S. troops are actually in Germany right now, and if any withdrawal started already under the previous administration? And also, I would like to know the position of the Secretary on the relationships with Turkey and the fact that Turkey now is in possession of the Russian S-400.
Look, I'm going to have to. I didn't prepare for the exact number of personnel we have in Germany, but that's a gettable number, and we can get that for you. The only thing I would say and try to reiterate is what I said before in his conversation with the Minister of Defense of Germany. He made it clear that while no decisions have been made yet, whatever decisions are made about our troop levels there or anywhere in Europe, and we're going to make those in consultations with the governments concerned. We're grateful for the support that the German government continues to give us and has given us for so many years. And we will absolutely make sure that they are properly consulted if when there's any changes to be talked about. As for Turkey, again, I would remind that Turkey's a long-standing and valued NATO ally, but their decision to purchase the S-400 is inconsistent with Turkey's commitments as a U.S. and NATO ally. Our position has not changed. The S-400 is incompatible with the F-35, and Turkey has been suspended from that program. We urge Turkey not to retain the S-400 system. Turkey had multiple opportunities over the last decade to purchase the Patriot defense system from the United States and instead chose to purchase the S-400, which provides Russia revenue, access, and influence. Okay, I'll take one more, and I'll take it from the room, and then we'll head out. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks. We're talking about vaccines. Once the vaccine is FDA approved, will it be mandated to soldiers, and then you'd go and pick up all those that have been denying it? And then I'd like to follow up on the rotations that you mentioned. So rotations are going to be continuing. And in Europe specifically, does the Secretary agree with what Secretary Esper said last July, that more rotations should be happening in Eastern Europe? And are those conversations ongoing, or are they going to wait until the 6-month review finishes?
I don't know of any changes to rotational deployments to Eastern Europe, and I have nothing in terms of future decisions to announce with respect to that today. On your other questions, a hypothetical, I don't want to get ahead of FDA certification of the vaccine. If it becomes a certified FDA-approved vaccine, then I'm sure that medical policy in the military will adjust to that. What that looks like exactly, I'm not at liberty to say today. Right now, it's being offered on a voluntary basis, and we're going to have to, not have to. We are going to continue to respect that. Okay, thanks everybody.
DC, who's footing the bill?
How did I not know that you were going to just jump right in there? Who's footing the bill? What?
For the National Guard in the nation's capital.
I would refer you to the Army for that. I don't have the specific information about the budget process there, but the Army could probably better answer.
And when are they leaving?
As I said before, and the Secretary made this case when he was up on Capitol Hill visiting with guardsmen, that we don't want them to perform this mission one day longer than they have to. And we are proud of them, and we are grateful for what they're doing, leaving their families and their jobs, and guarding our Capitol grounds in some cold, nasty weather. And it was inspiring, at least for me personally, to see them out there. It makes you proud, but we don't want them there one day longer than they need to be. And as I told you before, as long as the Secretary believes there's a valid requirement that we have to meet at the request of federal and local law enforcement as well as the city, we're going to do that. Okay, thanks everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Go Kansas City.
Go Brady.
Tampa Bay. You just said that to tick me off. For CENTCOM. Who's CENTCOM rooting for?
Good question.
That sound will be used for Monday. Okay, I need some. I think I'm moving guard again. This sound will be used.